this video might seem very niche, but I actually just had the best time making it, because I think I've realised it's so interesting finding out all of the crazy unhinged things that all of these playwrights were up to hundreds of years ago. Like the stories of their lives and things that went on. It's just crazy. And also I feel like it's really useful to learn about the playwrights individually, because I feel like all too often we think about Shakespeare or non-Shakespeare, when actually I was watching a documentary and I don't know why I never thought about it before, but actually they all have their own individual genres that they cover, their own unique writing and voice, and it's the same with like all writers nowadays. Like they're all quite different and offering different things, and I think the more we know about that, the more we're able to make the most of all of the classical writing that's available, because I feel like sometimes you can just know one non-Shakespeare speech that you might want to use in an audition, but actually knowing the background and the kind of genres and the kind of audition monologues that each playwright has available is so useful to be able to make more informed decisions and find like the best material to use and to learn about it, and the stories that they've been through is just mad. Like I've told my friends, even my friends who are not interested at all in this and don't think they have an interest in Shakespeare classical text, I just like, that's mad, that's wild, why was this stuff going on? So I think it's actually more fun than it seems. Like I feel like this isn't going to reach the kind of audience that might actually be interested in it, because I think a lot of people discount themselves from being interested in this kind of thing, when actually it is very interesting. So please do share this round, and I'm going to cover in a little clip each all the kind of main lessons, things I've learned, like various different audition monologue recommendations, things about their life, genre, their work, their plays. So if you want to skip to a specific playwright as well, you can do, and that's what this video is. So John Ford is someone who I would personally consider to be quite an active playwright, because he wrote 8 plays on his own, but he also collaborated with lots of other people and contributed to their plays as well. And he was a Cambridge boy, which lots of them were. Lots of them went to the University of Cambridge, which is one of the reasons why Shakespeare is thought of as kind of standing out, because he wasn't from that kind of background. But there are certain types of themes that are commonly present in John Ford plays. Like he writes quite tragic plays about sort of unusual, abnormal psychological behaviour to do with romance. And his most famous play is called 'Tis Pity She's a Whore, and it's about incest, like a brother and sister in love together, which is obviously quite morally questionable. And there's a lot of different debates around this, because some people say, is he an incest sympathiser in a way? Like, is he trying to humanise the experience because the protagonists are having this forbidden love, and lots of his different plays are about like having these intense desires that you like shouldn't really go through with. But like also I would compare it to, potentially there's a potential that like today we sometimes centre morally questionable protagonists in a story. Like there are various different shows and plays surrounding the protagonist and like the perceived hero of the story, typically in the way the play is structured, being like a murderer or like something questionable. So there's a lot of questionable morality and passions in his play, and it's all quite tragic and quite like abnormal. Like psychologically it's a bit weird, I guess. So Thomas Kyd is mainly known for writing the play The Spanish Tragedy, and this play I have seen being used for audition monologues. I think there's quite a few different monologues that you could use in there, so I think that's something that's useful to know. However, Thomas Kyd as a person I think is considered a bit morally questionable, but then again lots of them were. But I think that's also not an excuse, because he was imprisoned, I've found, because of something called the Dutch church libel, which is when there was quite a xenophobic anti-immigration poem that was part, I think anonymously really, on the door of a Dutch church in London, and they thought it was him, and they thought it was him and not Marlowe like he claimed it was, because the verse quality was not very good and was not up to the standard of Marlowe. So I don't know if that means that the standard of Thomas Kyd's writing is not as good as Marlowe, but there are monologues that people use, and there are monologues that you could use. And also, it is claimed and considered that maybe he contributed to some of the plays that Shakespeare wrote, like maybe he wrote the early version of Hamlet, maybe he contributed to King Lear. So, like, as with all of them, there's a lot of stuff that's unknown about him, and it's not even confirmed whether or not he did do the Dutch church libel, but that is just mainly what he's known for. He's mainly got this one play, The Spanish Tragedy, but it is quite a popular play at the time, and still now it's quite known. So I want to talk about these two Thomases together, and that is Thomas Dekker and Thomas Middleton, because I have been recommended the monologue Mole from The Roaring Girl, which they both wrote together, and I think it's a really interesting monologue because I think sometimes people can get down about the fact that lots of classical speeches for women aren't like your powerful women speeches. Like, obviously there's sometimes power that you can find within them, wanting men and obsessing over men, rah rah rah, all of that, but sometimes it can just get you down that that's a lot of what the female speeches are about, and other speeches for men are a bit more empowering. So I like that Mole from The Roaring Girl is a bit more of a powerful speech, and Thomas Dekker is, from what I've seen, known more for his comedies and tragicomedies, but actually a lot of his plays are unfortunately lost and not able to be therefore found and performed. Whereas Thomas Middleton, there's a lot of his plays around, and lots of people consider him like second to Shakespeare and like a Shakespeare alternative. I think a lot of them, various different people will argue, is second to Shakespeare, but Thomas Middleton was known equally and equally well regarded for tragedy and comedy, and not a lot of them were. So it's quite nice to have that variety. And one I'd recommend for speeches is Women Beware Women, which I looked at before, and I think he's just known for writing quite good quality verse, and some of them are considered less high quality, but people tend to regard him as quite high quality across multiple genres. So John Webster is most famous for writing the two tragedies, The Duchess of Malfi and also The White Devil, which I think is interesting because I found out they were both set in Italy and based on real life events. But then I think that's not that uncommon, because The Merchant of Venice, Venice is a place in Italy, Romeo and Juliet, that's set in Italy. Like, I don't really know why they're all set in Italy when these are often British playwrights. Like, someone please tell me why they're all set in Italy, but there we are. It's quite dark and it's set in Italy, and lots of people describe it as being relatively complex script-wise. And I did Vittoria from The White Devil as a drama school audition monologue, and I think it's really nice because she's like really standing up for herself in a way that women often aren't, and she's really having to fight for herself, and it's less of the kind of like in love woman that I'm just trying to avoid having to play so much, because I feel like even in like musicals, lots of the songs are like that. I don't want to be doing all my audition material like that, so I think it's nice that it's got quite strong female characters attached to it, and that is mainly what he's known for, are those two tragedies. I think he wrote other stuff that was less successful, but that is who he is. So this playwright is once again a bit of a morally questionable one, but I guess we'll address that later, and first address who he is, what he did, what he wrote. So Ben Jonson was known for writing comedic plays, satirical plays. He was very known for the kind of comedic genre, and he sort of created his own comedy style of writing and plays called the Comedy of Humours, which actually sounds a bit grim when you explain it, so if that affects you, skip like 10-20 seconds. But basically there was a scientific idea that the human body was made up of 4 humours, which is kind of like the types of liquid that are in the body, like blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile, and those would influence your personality. Like, some of them would make you more melancholy, some of them would make you more like of a warm personality, and it's sort of the basis of commedia dell'arte and having stock characters, because like you'd be led by one specific humour and that would really define your character. So then there'd be all these different stock characters and there'd be comedy and the conflict and contrast between them. Although this specific style sort of faded out in popularity, it influenced a lot of other genres like commedia dell'arte and the formation of having specific stock characters in plays and in comedy and finding the comedy within that. So he is quite influential. However, he did murder someone, which I think makes me feel quite uncomfortable, and I don't like the fact that sometimes we perform his plays. I don't know how I feel about that, because do we want to amplify like the work of a murderer? Do I feel good about that? No, I don't think so. But for an example, this is a book that I was given of all his plays, and there's a lot going on there. So he's written a lot, he was well known, but he got away with not facing capital punishment for murder because he used the benefit of clergy, where if you could prove that you could read and write Latin, you wouldn't have to face capital punishment, which is very messed up. And I just think like he's very morally questionable because he got into a duel and killed another actor, which I'm glad we don't really do that so much now, but like that's really wrong. I don't know how to feel about him, to be honest, because I feel a little bit weird even like almost promoting his work now in this video, because he kills people and I don't support that, and I think that's really obviously really bad. So with Christopher Marlowe, I feel like there's so much to say, because as well as having such famous plays as classical texts go, he also is quite famous for his personal life, because he did sadly get murdered under quite mysterious circumstances at the age of 29, and he was believed to be gay, an atheist, potentially a secret agent as well. Like, his life story is quite interesting, and it's impressive that at the age of 29, when he passed away, he has such a legacy of different plays, and his plays are sort of known thematically for having very overly ambitious characters, and then it's about the morality of that is apparently the theme that connects the plays, but I feel like they're all relatively different in lots of other aspects surrounding that. Like outside of that, I feel like they're quite different. And I actually auditioned for one of his plays recently. I auditioned for Dr. Faustus, which has quite a lot of characters like Lucifer, Beelzebub, characters from hell, and it also has the 7 deadly sins. It's quite a lot to do with like that kind of religious aspect. So it was quite interesting, because doing it in an audition and seeing other people bring the scenes to life made me realise that there's actually so much potential for comedy, or potential to take it really seriously, and actually it's quite tragic and quite sad what happens. So I feel like there's so much potential in his writing, and he's known for having quite good quality verse. And Dr. Faustus is actually a very short classical play, so if you want to get into reading classical text, or if you want to put on a classical text, then that's quite a good accessible point, maybe I would say. And he's just very well known for good reasons. Actually, there's just so much to learn about him, so I'd really recommend, if you're interested, finding out more about his life and his work and his plays. So to end this, I feel like I should do a few disclaimers, because obviously this all happened hundreds of years ago, so there might be new research that comes out that says actually like the way we believe things to have gone down before actually isn't the case. And also I think John Webster is a bit later than Shakespeare, but like it's all a while ago, so I feel like it all kind of blends together. He's just slightly younger than some of the other ones, but these are just the main ones that I thought were worth talking about, but obviously there are so many other playwrights as well, as not just this like small number. But I just thought I'd do a little bit of research and give you an insight, so you can have an indication and a starting point about which ones you might be drawn to, which ones you might be interested in. And if you have any other information about these people you'd like to share, or anything you'd like to talk about in the comments, then please do, and please do subscribe and help me out. And thank you so much for watching. I hope it's been useful or interesting in some kind of way. Thank you, bye!